All right, so in the previous section, we saw how we could make a rough sketch of what a polynomial looks like once we have it in factored form. So the example we saw was we had a polynomial factored like this, and we were able to, again, use that information to make this rough sketch. The question now is, suppose we don't have it in factored form, suppose we know this, how do we go from here to get this? So basically what I'm going to do is use polynomial division, and I'm just going to demonstrate this using a couple examples. So these are things you've probably seen before. You may have done this with synthetic division. I'm going to use long division, just so you see how everything comes out. But the idea is just I'm going to have to find a way to factor this. And what's important here is if I've got a polynomial, and I know that I have a zero, so for example, looking at this, I know if that's a zero, I can factor out something like this. In this case, I can always factor out a polynomial of degree n like this, and this is going to be polynomial of degree n minus 1. If 2 is a 0, so if I know that this is true, I'm going to have 0 times q of 2, plus b is just equal to b, so that tells me that that b is 0. So if 2 is a 0, I know I can just write it like that. And basically I'm just going to go through, find zeros, and just keep factoring and working with it like that. Okay? So let's just go through and do the zero. So I'm going to work with this. So I'm going to ask, how do I go from here to there? So what do I know? I know that my p of x is 3x cubed minus 33x squared plus 114x minus 120, okay? And so what I'm going to do is, the thing to note is that when I plug in x equals 2, I get 0. And how would I know that? Is basically I just graphed it, okay? Went on to Desmos or whatever, graphed it and found that, or I tried some numbers. In this class, right, if you're in the middle of a quiz or test, you're going to have to hope that we picked a nice number and you can just try a few things. Okay? So because 2 is a 0, I know I can divide that out, and the remainder will be 0. So when I go through and do all this, the polynomial that I'm going to get up here is going to be my q of x, and this is going to be equal to q of x times x minus 2 plus the remainder, which I called b before. And if I do everything correct, and this, I made a good choice here, I know in advance that my remainder is 0. Okay? So let's see. So if that's a 0, I know my p of x is going to be x minus a times q of x. Right? And I know that my remainder is 0. Okay? So let's just go through and do this. Right, this works just like regular long division. I'm looking for a number here, so that when I multiply this number by this, I will make that cancel out. So the thing to notice is if I multiply x by 3x squared, I'll get 3x cubed, and this minus this gives me 0. Now this term I'm now stuck with, I've got to go with. So this times this will give me minus 6x squared. And now if I subtract this from this, I'm going to get 0. This minus this will give me minus 27x squared. And let me bring these down, right, because this is minus 0, minus 0. Okay. Now, I want to know what times x gives me minus 27x squared. If I take minus 27x times x, I'll get that. So this times this is minus 27x squared. And minus 2 times that is going to be plus 54x. Okay. Now if I subtract, this minus this will give me 0. This minus this is what, 70 or 60? Yeah. 60x minus 120. And now I just keep repeating this. I want to say now what times x gives me 60x? And that's just 60. So if I multiply that through, I get 60x minus 120. If I subtract, I get 0. So notice now, there's my remainder, and the b equals 0, and my original polynomial, so this is my q. So my p of x is going to be this thing times my q, so I get that. Okay, it's a bit of a mess. Let me rewrite that. And now I'm just going to start over and do exactly the same thing I can do to factor there. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to notice I have a quadratic. Once I get it down to a quadratic, I can use the stuff we've done before at the beginning of the semester. So in particular, what do I have now? So my p of x is x minus 2 times 3x squared minus 27x plus 60. Notice I can factor out a 3 here nicely. So that'll give me x squared. 3 times 9 is 27. And then 3 times 20 gives me the 60. Okay. And I happen to know that if I take an x minus 4 and x minus 5, I'll get minus 4 times minus 5 is 20. Minus 4 minus 5 is the 9. And there's that polynomial in factored form. Okay. So the idea is you keep dividing these things out until you get it down to a quadratic. And then once you have it as a quadratic, use either a quadratic equation or see if you can just factor it on your own. Okay. So now let's look at one more example. Okay. So let's see. So for this example, paper here because some of these numbers are going to get a little hairy. All right. So now I went and I graphed it, and I happened to notice that when I plugged in minus 2, it gets 0. Okay. So I went and I played with it. I looked at the graph and noticed I got it 1, 0 there. So that means I can factor out an x minus a minus 2. Well, x minus a minus 2 is the same thing as x plus 4. So let me see if I can get this out of there. Okay, and I'm going to hope I get a remainder of 0. If I don't get a remainder of 0, oops, that should be x plus 2, sorry. If I don't get a 0 for my remainder, then that means either that's a bad choice or I made a mistake in my algebra. Okay? Or I did a silly mistake like I just did and put the wrong number there. So I've got to be a little careful. What times x gives me minus 8x to the 4th? Well, minus 8x cubed. So I take this and multiply this through. Minus 8x to the 4th minus 16x cubed. Now I'm going to subtract this. This minus this is 0. This minus this is 96x cubed. This minus 0 is minus 68x squared. Okay, I'm going to get a little lazy here. I know that I'm going to eventually bring these down, so I'm just going to leave them there for now. All right, what times x gives me 96x cubed? That's going to be 96x squared. So that's what, 96x cubed plus, that's what, 192? Yes. 192x squared. This minus this is 0. This minus this, I'm just going to tell you, is minus 360x squared. I'm going to bring these down. Get that. Now I want to know what times x gives me that number. That's going to be minus 360x. Okay, so if I multiply that times that, I get minus 360x squared plus, that's going to be what, 720x? Yep, oops, be careful, minus 720x. This minus this is 0. I gotta be careful. This minus a minus that will give me 432x, and I'm going to bring that down. Keep that a little neater than that. So what do I have? I have 432x. Bringing that down gives me 864. What times x gives me 432x? And that's just going to be 432. So that times x is 432x. That times 2 is 468 plus. So this minus this is 0. This minus this is 0. So I have a remainder of 0. All right? So now, what can I do? This now means that my polynomial, so my original polynomial then, I can write as x plus 2 times this thing, like so. Let me rewrite that so it's a little neater. So I have that my p of x is x plus 2 times minus 8x cubed, it's 96x squared minus 360x plus 432. All right? And at this point now I have this thing times a cubic, and what I would do is I would graph this, look at it, try to plug in some numbers, figuring out where the zeros are. Once I get the zeros, then I'd go back and factor out the next 0, and then my q, the thing on top, will be a quadratic, and then I can just use the quadratic equation. I'm just going to leave that there for now. The important thing is to recognize that we have a divide and conquer situation here, right? We just try to knock off these things one at a time, keep reducing the order till we get it down to an x squared, where we can use the quadratic equation or something else.